Welcome to Après Midi in January on this very cold day in Paris. I want to thank everybody for being here. I would like to introduce these two guys on either side of me. Brian Dunhill with Dunhill Financial, Jonathan Hadida with Hadida Tax Advisors.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, they do not really need any introduction as far as I'm concerned. These are the two smartest financial guys I have ever known in my life. And I have asked them to just dialogue between them, which could get real interesting. We don't know what they're going to say or what they're going to talk about. Hopefully they know.
Every conversation goes
I was going to talk
differently.
about Bali all the time.
Bali?
Bali.
Okay, but after, when they are done, then we will have a chance for a Q&A, okay? Which means you can ask them anything as long as it's on topic. So don't talk to them about immigration, okay?
Nope.
We're going to talk about money. On
Yep.
that note, I'm leaving. You guys can get together and start your gig.
Cool. Thanks, Adrian. So, Brian, I know nothing about your firm, okay? I just moved to France. I want to know about your firm. What the heck do you guys do? How about that? You like that? Dialogue.
I thought we were going to talk about global warming and why it's so cold outside. You know, but
It's not that cold. You should see Canada.
well, we're a financial planning firm, so we're involved in every single aspect of how your money is going to work when you get here to France, and how you should be structuring all your finances, coordinating with your tax accountant to make sure that everything you're doing in the United States works with France, and vice versa. When it comes to currencies on pensions, to Social Security, to each and every one of your investments, all the way down to the fixed income being in the currency that you need it to be.
So you've already prepared this answer, I guess, because that doesn't sound off the cuff. My name is Jonathan Hadida. I am a tax guy. I sit around, I put numbers into a computer, and I come up with the best answer possible to reduce your taxes. No. We do French and US taxes for US individuals living in and around France. We specialize in Americans. We basically, 95% of our clients are Americans, 95% of our clients are Americans living in France. In and around, I say in and around France, I should really say in and around Paris, because Paris is its own little country. Every time I come to Paris, I'm reminded of just how much this is the Mecca. But basically, I'm really excited to speak to you all today. What we are going to talk about basically are the list of questions that people have come to us the most with. Okay, that's what we've prepared. It's not going to be a Tax 101 session, not Tax 202, nothing boring like that. It's just going to be boring questions. Okay. Again, we'll try our best not to be super boring. So I'll let Brian talk most of the time, because that way it'll be less dull. So we'll start with the simplest question I have. I have a lot of US dollars. Okay. I have no flipping idea how I'm going to pay for my house in France. What do I do, Brian? The US dollar, is it going up or down?
Well, that's a huge unraveling, and that's going to be the big question for the year. Last year, the main consideration of everything financial revolved around inflation. This year, it's starting to come away as that major question of when is inflation gone? We can answer in very simple ways. Australia, it's not gone. The United States, it looks like it's disappearing. And in Europe, it's kind of divided. We have Belgium, the Netherlands, Spain, they seem to have controlled their inflation. France and Germany, not so much. So why is this important? Well, on the 25th, we have the European Central Bank that's meeting. And then the 30th, we have the Federal Reserve. That's when we're going to get our first indications of the year of where interest rates, short-term interest rates, could go. Right now, we've got higher short-term interest rates in the United States than we do in Europe. Simply put, you're getting paid more on a US bank account than you are on a French bank account, right? Now, if inflation continues to stay lower in the United States, and the Federal Reserve can go with their indicated guidance of 3 rate cuts in 2024, but the European Central Bank is forced to keep rates at their current rate, we're going to see a flow of capital out of the dollar. And a flow of capital coming out of the dollar basically means the euro going up and the dollar going down. Now, that's the indicative view based on what's going on right now. But as we know, things can change very, very quickly. Nobody expected the drastic rate hikes that we had last year any place around the world. And I don't think anybody's in that same position where they're feeling confident in what inflation is going to look like by the end of the year. In fact, we have more than half of the world's population that's going to go to the voting booths this year. We might be stuck on just the US elections. No, this Saturday, we have the elections in Taiwan, and we have a ton of elections in between that are going to impact things in big ways. And as we know, they love to try to impact the economy to try to push out or push in whoever they're in favor for. So we're going to have a lot of activity this year that's going to guide those, and that's where we have to watch the central banks, and that's going to be guided by inflation. So another year of the same activity. I would expect the euro to hold a little bit stronger than the dollar, which means that money that we want to invest in our house here, for our house here in France, we should have it in euros already to hedge it. But in turn, any money that you have in equities, they're tired of me talking, they've turned out the lights already. Any money that we have in equities, we should be in favor of US equities. Well, why is that? If we're expecting the currency to weaken, wouldn't we expect to hold other currencies when it comes to our equities? No, because 60% of the Magnificent Seven's revenues, so those big 7 tech firms, your NVIDIA, Apple, Google, Tesla, 60% of that revenue comes from abroad. So when the dollar goes down, those revenues from abroad end up coming in stronger, meaning the S&P 500 will be forced up. We could have a bad economy and a good stock market. They're not totally correlated. And that's the part that you need to remember. So coming back to your question,
change my dollars.
The euro is going to be the place to hedge your funds if you've got utilization in this next year here in Europe. There's more risk of it going up than going down.
So in other words, you should have property in Europe.
Everybody in this room should already be talking to Adrian about that. So that's a foolish question.
Okay. So basically, my house in Nice, if I have US dollars, I'm converting it now, going out and buying my house in Nice because Nice is the best. Second best to Paris. Should not, I mean, a crowd of Parisians don't want to get hurt.
You can either have your actual money in euros, or you could be looking at a forward contract.
Okay. And
so
would you guys do a forward contract?
We can do a forward contract. Otherwise, you can use some of the service contracts, like Money Corp through Adrian is a great one to do a forward contract. Now,
Would you please explain what a forward contract is?
As long as he explains the taxation, because I'm not going to deal with the taxation.
I'll do forward contract. I'll do forward contract because I understand it this much, so that way it'll be simple. A forward contract is you tell them, hey, I have 100,000 euros.
That?
Money Corp or Brian.
Currency broker.
Sorry, thank you, Adrian.
Okay.
A currency broker. As you can see, it's not my business. But you tell the currency broker, I have 100,000 euros. I want to convert it over time, or $100,000. I want dollars. Sorry, ma'am. $100,000. Yes, ma'am. $100,000 to convert to euros over time. But I want to lock it in at today's exchange rate. They'll lock it in for you. They can lock it in. Money Corp can lock it in for 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. They can lock it in for 2 years. I sat next to the lady from Money Corp at a dinner once, and she told me this.
It's true. You're right.
Well, it happens rarely, but it happens from time to time.
Even a blind squirrel gets a nut every once in a while.
Exactly.
Right?
You lock it in for 2 years, and basically that's where you can hedge. So you basically lock it in. This was the thing. This was the play a year and a half ago when it was 1-to-1, or it was the U.S. dollar was stronger. That was when this should have been taking place. The next best time is now, because if tomorrow is going to be worse than today, now is the next best time. But basically, you lock it in at today's exchange rate, and then you change your money over time. Is basically to hedge. It's you don't have to do it 100,000 today. You can do 50,000 today, and then lock it in. And then 6 months from now, when the U.S. dollar has gone down, or heaven forbid goes really down because bad things happen. Did I get it? Did I get it close to right?
You were spot on, and I'm just going to double down on that. So typically, you have to put 10% down to buy the forward contract. So let's just say you have a CD back in the States that you're earning 5% on. Now you put 10% down, so you only invest 90% into that CD. So you've got 90,000 in the CD, which means you're making 4.5% on the U.S., 10,000 on the bond. On the Ford contract. Now all of a sudden, as long as you're making 4.5% there, as long as you're not able to earn more than 4.5% in euros, you're doing better by having a Ford contract with U.S. CDs, right? So essentially, that's why we know that there's going to be a flow of money back into euros as rates go down in the States if they stay higher over here in Europe. Because the flow, if we're able to do that on smaller values of 100,000, you can bet the big institutions that have billions of dollars are definitely keeping their money on the U.S. side of things and then just hedging it back into the other currencies.
Okay, so just to clarify.
We went deep quick.
Yeah.
No, just to clarify the forward contract. If you want to move 100,000 and you put 10% down on the 100,000 you're moving, they lock in the rate.
Exactly.
Right? And then you have up to 2 years to move that additional 90,000.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Dolores. Okay, and so that way you get that rate, but you don't have to move the money until
you're ready.
That 2-year period.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, you can lock in the exchange rate now, wait for the apartment on Jardin Anglais to come available, and then you can go talk to Adrian and buy it. All right. Yes. Yes. Talk to Adrian first.
Where does that money reside?
Wherever you want.
The 10% is going to be with the currency broker. The 90%, you keep it wherever you would like it. You don't have to. It's not collateral or anything.
Anything like a call, where you might get a call?
You could be called away, and every single one of those contracts is going to be defined differently. Now, essentially, this is where you can sometimes negotiate to only have 5% down, but most of them would like 10% down so that they don't have to have a call, or shouldn't have to have a call. But those are all from one currency broker to the next, what you're actually negotiating. Depends on the currency broker. But essentially, if you go through some of the firms, it's really just the spot rate.
About 1% between the buy and the sell rate. Okay, move on, guys.
Move on. All right.
So now,
this could end up in a lot.
Oh
of
yeah, we could
questions.
get stuck on the.
So you asked us to have a conversation, Adrian.
for it.
But now you want to talk about boring stuff? Let's talk about French tax residency, Brian.
That's what I was just about to get to.
All right.
So Jonathan, everybody's come into this room. Does that make them French tax resident?
No. No, it doesn't, Brian. Thank you for asking that. That is a great question. What an off-the-cuff observation you had.
Did I read your question correctly?
Yes. So, French tax residency. You live in France, you hang out in France, you're implanted in France. There's different answers for every single fact and situation. France, under the French tax code, you have to look at multiple factors to determine whether or not you are a French tax resident in the year. Notably, where is your professional obligations? Where is your principal home? And most importantly, and the one that usually comes to play, is where is your center of vital interests? And basically, the center of vital interests, you look at a variety of things. You look at where are your kids? Where's your spouse? Where's your bank accounts? Where are your doctors? Where are your pharmacies? So on and so forth. Basically, we look at where is your life, okay? Now, this is why, people come to me all the time and say, I'm in France for 172 days. I'm not a French tax resident, right? The answer is maybe, okay? I forgot to start off with, the answer to everything when it comes to taxes is maybe. Just to be clear.
It depends.
It depends. Sorry, I probably. It depends. So it depends. Okay. The question that I had, 172 days in France. Well, that person, if he or she spends 172 days in France, 100 days in Italy, and the remainder of the time in Spain, well, guess what? They have more ties to France than anywhere else. Now let's go back and make it another fact set. Someone comes to France, Pam here. She comes to France 3 months a year. Did I get it right? Ish? 6 months? 3 to 6 months, okay? Let's say, and Pam's a perfect example because basically I have a lot of clients like this. They come to France for 3 months to hang out in Paris, or to hang out in Nice, or to hang out in Avignon, or wherever it is. Well, that doesn't make them French tax residents because they have closer ties to America. So it really comes to facts and circumstances, okay? And that's why you have to always be very careful with your facts and circumstances. And this is one I'm actually going tomorrow to give a presentation. I don't know if you all met Daniel Testato, our immigration attorney. I'm going to his office tomorrow specifically just to talk about this and why my answer and his answer are different. And why the tax answer is facts and circumstances. The immigration question is basically cool. You can go to France, you get a tourist visa, go. My answer is maybe you're not a tax resident and maybe we don't want to make you a tax resident. Okay.
So in other words, you don't have an actual point system like we have in the UK or Australia.
Nope.
You are literally making a subjective determination of whether you think somebody is going to be tax resident
as
or not.
best as you can, because again, the French tax authorities can come and override you. So
Right.
you've got to remember that, you know, what my thought process is could differ from what the French tax office. If you get unlucky and the person in that building right over there knocks on your door and says you're a French tax resident, well, you're going to have to prove that you're not. You're going to have to prove that your connections are closer to America or to Spain or to wherever than here. So it really is facts and circumstances, and that's why it's vital. And again, you know, it's vital to ask this before coming to France, because again, some people, you don't want to be a French tax resident. If you've got too much, there's some reasons that you don't want to be. Again, everyone's facts and circumstances are different. So really, we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
And the most important two are where you lay your head and where you do your work.
Yeah. Lay your head, do your work.
Kids come later.
Kids come
Pharmacy,
later. Pharmacies
latest.
come later. But again, it all depends on your.
But
It's your
subjective.
social. You have to look at your social aspects. You have to look at your economic aspects. If your social ties are more to France, then you more likely than not are going to be a French resident. If all your friends are here, if your canasta club is here, if you're playing pickleball here, well, you're probably going to be a French tax resident. So the more ties to France, the more likely you're a French tax resident. Now, again, being a French tax resident is not the death and end all for everyone. We are going to talk about some reasons why some people don't want to be French tax residents later, but you got to remember, the U.S.-French tax treaty, now I'm trying to remember how it was called, Brian. Oh yeah, bee's knees for American retirees.
He did an entire episode where he just talked about the bee's knees of all double taxation treaties.
This is the greatest tax treaty in the world. The Americans have done, whoever the person who wrote the treaty for y'all, amazing. That person deserves a high five from every flippin' American living in France. Because retiring in France you are going to pay less tax in France as a retiree than you would in America. It's basically Florida without the swamps, okay?
Wait, so divided politics?
I wasn't going into politics. I was just talking about the swamps. Sorry, I apologize. But without the swamp, without whichever way you want to look at the swamp. Yes, sir.
Which animals can kill you here?
Which animal? A lot of. We'll get to that in a second. Yes, sir.
Detail how you pay less in retiring.
How you pay less in retiring. Okay, great. So how can you pay less taxes in retiring? Most of y'all in this room are retirees. I'm not going to make a generalization. If I'm making a mistake, I apologize. Most of y'all are retirees. Let's say half of y'all came from California. What a magnificent state. So much sunshine, so much beauty, so much taxes. You pay a sunshine tax in California. So how will you pay less taxes here than if you reside in Fresno, California? Simple answer. You don't pay state taxes. You break state residency. So if you can break your state residency, you don't pay state taxes. You'll still pay the same on the federal side than you would in America, but you won't pay state taxes. On the French side, now I'll talk about the French side because I basically went over it quickly. The French tax treaty, bee's knees for American retirees, says under a variety of articles, but notably Article 24, that U.S. sourced investment income, interest, dividends, capital gains, real estate properties in America, U.S. pensions are not taxable in France.
Social Security?
Social Security. Well, that's pension. Sorry. Social Security. Sorry. Social Security.
Just making
pension.
sure we define it.
Yeah, just more precision. So, all these sources of income that basically are what you're going to live on in retirement are going to be reported on your French tax return, but are going to get a deemed tax credit on your tax return. So you're not going to wind up paying any taxes in France on your U.S. sourced income. So basically, you'll still pay federal tax like you would have back in California. You're not going to pay U.S. state taxes, so you're going to pay less than if you'd sat in Fresno. Okay. Now, one quick reminder, and this is basically I'm saying this because if you're my client, I want you to understand this. The French tax authorities make mistakes on American tax returns. Eugene, you know what I'm talking about. But basically, they mess up. Okay, it happens. It's a relatively easy fix. There are some tax offices. I'm currently in the process of working with one up in Barin that the woman and I did not have a very friendly conversation yesterday. It had to end with, I will send you an email, because I just couldn't understand her. But basically, long story short, they will make mistakes. And if they make mistakes, it's not to freak out, because you got to remember, for me and my firm and firms like mine, you guys are my everything. Americans rule. For the American French tax office right there, you're 1 in 1,000. Okay, so they will make mistakes, but it's an easy fix because the treaty is clear. Okay. Yes, Adrian.
Okay, here's the deal. If you come here as a retiree and after 90 days you can apply to be on the French healthcare system,
Yes.
and you're living here full time, then you can do away with your Medicare, and then you can reduce that expense, and you can save that money as well, correct?
I would be careful about that. I would be very careful about that, and this is an it depends question, because now you've hit a subject where I'm going to give an answer. I'll give you the technical answer, and then I'll give you the what's really happening answer. And for this, I'm going to give a shameless plug to the AARO. Google Puma AARO. They have a magnificent article on their website about Puma and Puma. It's called Puma. It's the Cotisation Subsidiaire Maladie. It's a 6.5% surcharge for anyone who technically does not work in France or does not earn pension Social Security in France, or Social Security from a European country, or Social Security from Switzerland. If you don't fall into one of those categories, technically you are required to pay this Puma surcharge. It is 6.5% on your investment income. Okay, so if you have $100,000 of investment income, you technically are required to pay the 6.5% surcharge. Now, many of you probably have not paid it. And the reason is, and this is we're going to say it in very shush tones, they're making a mistake. They don't know what they're making a mistake. There's a mistake going on right now, and we're not going to tell anybody, because they are treating U.S. Social Security and U.S. pensions the same as a French pension or a Swiss pension or another European pension. So you're not paying this Puma. Now, why would I not give up Medicare? At least I wouldn't give it up right away. Is A, you don't know if you're going to move back to America.
Absolutely.
So.
Oh, well, that I can answer.
Yes,
no one moves back to America. Okay?
Fair enough. Fair enough. So A, you don't know if you're going to move back to America, because the good Lord works in his or her own way, and we can never know. So one, that. Two, if you have Medicare, and again, if you have Medicare and they hit you with this Puma surcharge, you can say, hey, wait a second, I actually have Medicare back in America. You should not come after me. You can try. So it's just putting your odds in your favor. Now again, the Puma thing, right now, most of my clients don't get it. It's not rare, but it should happen more. It just doesn't happen as much, which is what it is. We're gonna smile and move on for our life.
But if we keep the Medicare, but like, what if once I get my mutuelle, I'm going to get rid of my Kaiser membership in California. Can I do that, or should I keep it?
No, I don't know. In terms of that,
That's supplemental insurance, but I'm talking about the government Medicare. I wouldn't get rid of it.
Yeah, probably not. Again, the thing is, I don't know. On this one here, the Puma, I don't know the right answer. I honestly don't, because it's not, what's happening is not, in my opinion, technically correct. Because I literally, when you read the rules, y'all should be paying taxes, should be paying the Puma on this. It's a weird one.
Just to clarify.
Is it 6.5% on your retirement income?
Investment.
Oh, investment.
Investment income. Interest, dividends,
dividend.
capital gains, not your pensions.
Okay.
By pensions, you're meaning the IRAs and any qualified plans.
Yes.
Investments everywhere, like
Yes, ma'am.
Global.
Yes, not IRAs, not Social Security.
Can you offset that using the double taxation?
Yeah. my dear
Is it a
friend, my
tax
dear
rate?
friend Benjamin is trying that right now, and I am waiting to see what my dear friend Benjamin comes out with what the answer is, because I don't know the answer to that. I luckily haven't had this problem that much with my clients. We've had it a couple of times. The couple of times, it is what it is. You have to pay if you have to pay. Sorry, Phil.
To clarify on giving up Medicare, there are several different schedules of Medicare. So as an example, I have A,
Yeah.
but I gave up B because I would have no use for it, and as I understand it, and it was quite expensive, and as I understand it, the penalty there is like either 10 or 15%, if I want to recapture it, is 10 or 15% a year off of the lowest of charge. So the penalty, if I move back
It's
to
minutes.
America,
It's
in
small.
3 years, I'm going to pay 30% more a month of $170.
Oh,
Pay.
whatever.
The,
So that's
the
not a huge
normal
number.
the normal calculation that we use to determine it is probability of going back to the States multiplied by the cost and how it would impact your financial situation on the other side. So the more affluent you are and the less likely you are to go back to the United States, the more we suggest not to take it. If all of a sudden you're 50-50 and it would impact you significantly to have to pay a lump sum, then there's a higher likelihood that we would say you should go ahead and keep it.
But you mean stay in on A and just let, right.
Correct.
Yeah. Again, it's a really a question. Again, if you're planning to, it depends. But it really, if you're never going to move back, if you're, if heaven forbid something happens in November and it goes the way that, and basically if something happens, let's be honest.
What's in November?
I don't know, but this room's gonna be. If something bad happens in November,
Oh,
this room's gonna be much fuller than the next January. Exactly. my climate.
Staying off politics.
Yes, sir.
You said that if you retired in France, you pay less tax possibly.
Yes, sir.
What happens with French wealth tax?
French wealth tax. So the French wealth tax, you have to remember the French wealth tax has now become a real estate surcharge. It is not a pure wealth tax as it is in Switzerland, where basically once you have over 200 some odd thousand in your bank account, you get hit with wealth tax. It is a real estate surcharge. If you have net value of your real estate over 1.3 million euros. Okay, so if your net value, so again, if you have a €2 million property, you have $1 million mortgage, it's $1 million net, you don't pay wealth tax. Okay? Now, the wealth tax goes up to 1.5%-ish, but that's on properties over $10 million, 10 million euros. So the wealth tax, it's a charge, but it's still not that huge. But I'll throw in a story. I had a client, he came to me, and he's like, I have 2 rental properties of 200 plexes in Boulder, Colorado. And I said, neat. I said, how much are they worth? He goes, 70 million each. I said, cool. He said, what is the best tax planning you can tell me about living in France? And I said, number 1 tax plan I can give you, my friend, is get the flip out of Dodge within 5 years. And because basically, for the first 5 years, your foreign properties are not included in the wealth tax calculation. But after 5 years, they are. So this dude, he had to go. So he's now gone. Because he basically was going to get hit with 1.5% on $150 million of property. It just wasn't worth it. Let's be honest, croissants are
But
not.
if he can afford $150 million worth of property,
He got-
who cares about the tax?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean, give me a break.
He got lucky. This guy got lucky because he bought in 2008, but that's another story. Long story short, the wealth tax is in place. It's a real estate surcharge. It's up to 1.5%. It's on 1.3 million net, and it usually only includes your French properties, at least for the first 5 years, and then we bring in your American properties too. So it's something to just keep in mind. Yes, sir.
What if they're an LLC? Does that make it?
That does not make the slightest difference. Doesn't make the slightest difference because LLCs are generally transparent and flow through, so it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
But the politics could change.
Politics can always change.
It used to be everything.
Yes,
Now
ma'am.
it's only-
Yeah, no, and that's why again, right now it's a real estate surcharge. What it's going to be, let's be honest, in 3-4 years things will probably could change. So for now, it's a real estate surcharge. Tomorrow, le bon Dieu sait. I have no idea.
Okay, so you talked about one double taxation treaty,
Yeah.
but in fact, we have three. We have our totalization agreement.
Yeah.
We don't have an estate tax double taxation agreement. And then we just talked about the income tax.
Yeah.
So, should we talk a little bit about estate taxes? Or are you going to just push me out of the frame right now?
Estate taxes.
Oh, deep breath from Adrian on top of it.
Oh, Lord.
Here's the long and the short of it. I'm going to phrase it with one sentence that Adrian gets mad at me every flippin' time I say it, but I don't care because I have to say it because it's the truth. Don't die in France. Period. Don't die here. You're going to die somewhere else, please.
Anywhere?
Not in France.
Well, Portugal has 0, and
Spain
the
has-
last time we
Italy,
did this in
Italy.
Nice, I said just go die over there in
Die
Italy
in
because
Italy.
it's 4%. But then I was asked, how do you make sure that you die over there?
Yeah.
And
Well, you didn't have,
well,
you didn't have cannoli.
this is
Even if you have no income, no property here?
If you're
It's
a French
global
tax
assets.
resident and you die in France, French inheritance taxes apply on your worldwide assets. And that's where it gets significantly punitive, is that the French inheritance rules are very, very rough. They are up to, so if you wanted to leave all your money to your postman because he or she is nice, it is up to 60%, well, it is 60% of your assets that he or she will have to pay taxes on. So it's
well, why don't you start with the good news? Spouses.
spouses, sure.
What do they pay?
Nothing.
Nothing.
As long as they have a will.
Yes.
And
Yes, as
children,
long as children, they pay.
Goes up to a tier, yeah.
Up-
even though they're not under the American tax law?
No, this is French.
This is
we're talking.
only
This is
French, yeah.
No, but if I live here and my,
Yeah, it's.
You're a
it's
French
where-
resident,
it's
so
where
you're
you
cleared in
live.
the estate,
Oh, it's where you live.
in the French estate.
So even if you have an American will, an American trust,
Yeah.
it's still,
Yeah.
And how long must you be a resident outside of France? Could I just
That's
go there the day I'm ready to die?
That's a fair that's a fair question, and that's the question. The question is, unfortunately, it's a facts and circumstances question. So again, it depends. But let's give the again. I don't like estate questions. That's why Brian knows it. But
So, to answer that question, domicile becomes one of the most controversial things
Yeah.
that you can actually discuss because the only time you determine domicile is upon death. Unless you gift beforehand and you see if it gets accepted by the notaire. But that is not even foolproof because your pharmacy could move out of the state.
Yeah.
What did you say? Your wife could move out of the state, and the
kids,
job,
yeah,
etc. Therefore, your domicile changed. But we're not going to get a determination until you die. So luckily, you don't care because you're dead.
But it's.
But that is why, essentially, when you start moving up the plank, you first have these states that, hey, do everything over here, you don't pay any taxes. And then all of a sudden, you start moving over towards residency-based taxation, then you have domicile-based taxation, and then you have citizens-based taxation. So the United States is citizens-based taxation, the UK, domicile-based. Here,
residents.
we're residency-based taxation. So naturally, if you have to raise more income, where is it easier to tax from? At death.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's everybody's going to be shifting over to that UK model? That is why we're talking about it, is to figure out the right tactics to get around it so that we're informed, so that it doesn't come as a surprise, that it's not to detract coming here to France, it's just to say, we don't have a $12.8 million exemption, therefore plan for it.
Yeah.
Plan for it before you become resident, plan for it while you're over here, use the gifting regiment, make sure to talk to Adrian at length about where you should structure or how you should structure the real estate as an SCI or the such. Don't just ignore it thinking my assets are in the States.
Yeah. No, it's one of those. It's a heavy question, and it's one that has to be looked at carefully and slowly. And again, you're here now. There's not much we can do in terms of gifting before you come, because before people come, I always recommend gift as much as you can while you're in the States, because that's the rules in the States are better than in France. But again, it's not the end of the world, because you have to live somewhere, Adrian, and you have to enjoy life. But basically, the problem with France is that that's where they get you. They get you on the inheritance.
But you'll be dead and you won't care.
There you go. Yes, ma'am.
I care.
Disinherit family if they live here?
That's a great question, and the answer is no, as far as I understand.
What was the question?
But I do not specialize. I don't
Repeat the
specialize in
question.
this. Oh, sorry. The
I
question
didn't-
was, can you disinherit family? I don't specialize in this, so
Ah.
I'm gonna preface this by saying I don't believe you can. But if you
I'll actually correct that. So if you don't write a will and you don't actually use another nation's
another
directive,
nation,
you cannot. But there's a European initiative that's called the Brussels 4, IV 4. The Brussels 4 amendment basically states that if you're between two different nationalities, you can use whichever one you want to as your preference to how your will is conducted. So you could say, as an American, I would like to utilize my American will, and therefore I can let anybody inherit. Now that doesn't avoid tax, that avoids the Napoleonic Code. So in other words, that means I can leave all my money to Jonathan, but he's going to get taxed 60% on receiving it, right?
but
so
imagine how much money I'll have.
After the boat, next to
After the
nothing.
phone, exactly. There you go.
So yes, you just have to be careful with how you utilize that in making sure that you structure it the same in two different ways. The initiative of that was because you'd have people that would have a house, a vacation home, say in Spain, they lived in France, but they were American, and all of a sudden you'd have to clear the estate in 3 places. So the European Union was trying to say, nope, it should be cleared by one place and then the tax is distributed between those different segments. The reality is it means that we can avoid that Napoleonic Code. He lost the war after all.
Yes, ma'am.
I've spoken to a notaire and a lawyer in the U.S. and for long-term French residents, people that have been here 20, 30 years and can't really claim domicile in the U.S. anymore, they said the European directive isn't really applicable because it has to be accepted by the state that you choose in the U.S. And I was wondering if you had an opinion on that.
I honestly
Can you
don't.
repeat
The
the
question is basically, can you use a will to state that the U.S. rules apply if you're a long-term resident in France? And the answer is, Adrian's saying yes.
I just did it.
Adrian just did it. So
Yeah.
Have you actually gone through the American probate process? Because the French, the notaires say, if you don't have a probate court in the U.S. that accepts your claim of residency, that it's thrown out and then you're back to the default Napoleonic Code.
I think you'd want to talk to a notaire that specializes on the American side because, like Jonathan was talking about earlier, we're such a small number of individuals over here. The code was really built for Europeans going cross-border, and it's been applied several times for Americans over here. And so what I would do is I would talk to Adrian about what notaires she's used with Americans over here in France, because several of them have used those types of initiatives.
I've had no issues whatsoever.
Can you say it again?
She's had no issues whatsoever.
I've had no issues whatsoever.
Have you had people die?
Well, I haven't died yet.
That could have gotten really weird.
Because I've gone round and round and round on this one, and they've told me it's impossible.
So
I think you need to talk to a different notaire.
shoot me, if you don't mind, shoot me an email, and I'll put you in contact with a colleague of mine who specializes more in these questions. Because again, I don't do this very much.
Okay.
I'll put you in contact with a colleague of mine who specializes more. He may be able to help. If he's not able to help, then Adrian's got a notaire in the south of France that we work with, and we can put you in contact with her as well. Come, I'll give you my card after. Shoot me an email. I'll put you in contact with my colleague, and then again, if he can't help, I'll put you in contact with Carol.
Because I just created a French will, which designates the U.S. as the law. But I want to use the U.S. to be clean.
But just to be clear, just to be clear on what Adrian's doing, it elects the U.S. rules to apply. It doesn't apply for taxes.
No, I get that. I totally understand.
Just to be
But,
clear.
okay. I'll talk to you maybe after. Maybe not everyone.
Okay.
Okay, so we've done the double taxes.
Yes.
we've done the estate taxes,
Yes.
which we don't have a double taxation agreement.
No.
Totalization agreement would be the trifecta.
Sure, totalization agreement. What do you?
What is that?
The totalization agreement is a social security agreement whereby if you work in France and you're a U.S. employee, you could have your employer send you over to France for up to 5 years, and you can stay on U.S. social security. Okay. Additionally, if you're in France and you're doing a self-employed business, or you've registered as a micro entrepreneur or something, that helps you avoid the double taxation from a social security perspective. You only wind up paying social security in France, not in America.
But plenty of it.
Yes, but you get so
No,
much.
just so you know.
But basically, if there's a totalization agreement, so it's a social security totalization agreement, it's something that you want to look at before you come over to France to work. And if you're working in France as a self-employed person, you want to make sure. I actually, funnily enough, read a post on Facebook recently. The woman said, my U.S. accountant has said I have to pay U.S. Social Security on my French self-employment income, but I just paid all this taxes to her staff. Why, oh why? And then the Facebook post went crazy, and everyone was telling her that she was crazy or whatnot, and I just basically moved on with my life, because there's only so much you can do. But basically, if you work in France and you pay Social Security in France, you don't pay Social Security to America. That's basically what the totalization agreement says. And if you come over from a U.S. employer, you can stay on U.S. Social Security for the first 5 years, which again is something that's important for people because, again, when you're coming over at 35 and you don't know what you're going to do, you may go back within 5 years. And again, it helps people decide. It gives people time to decide. Yes, ma'am.
So what if you keep your company in the U.S., but you start one here?
If you keep your company in the U.S. and you start one here, in what sense? Sorry, my ask. That's a heavy question because actually it leads to two different questions. If you have a company in the U.S. and you're living here, there's something called permanent establishment risk, whereby the French government may say, "Hey, this U.S. company is working all in France, and we want to tax all its income in France."
No, two different companies.
Oh no, I know, but that's the first question. The first problem is if you have a company in the U.S. and you run it from France, they could always knock on your door and say this company is a French company because you're running it from France. But if you have a secondary company, if you have a second company in France, it's just you're totally fine. You'll be fine. You'll pay Social Security to France on that one, not to America. Okay.
Along those lines, the same subject with Social Security.
Yes, sir.
I've been working here over 20 years. There's that treaty where you can move over. You can decide which country's Social Security benefits to get, retirement benefits to get.
So
Interesting one, right?
you're going to get paid both of them, but there's an aspect of the totalization agreement that basically states you need 40 credits on the U.S. side. So let's just do that, and it kind of equates in the same kind of ways with most other countries. But everybody's American in here, and we're in France, so let's go with that one. So if you would normally need 40 credits, which would be equivalent to 4 credits a year for 10 years, but let's just say you only work there for 5 years, so you have 20 credits, but you work 20 credits worth over here in France, they'll basically say you're going to get a partial one in the United States and a partial one in France. So that's where you'll get hit on both sides. You're going to get hit.
You can decide which one you want to go to. I know Americans are doing that now.
You'll get both.
No, they just want which is most advantageous. Do they want all their Social Security? In other words, France will recognize those quarters that you did in America, or vice versa?
They're not going to recognize. They're basically going to not penalize you for not completing the 40 credits, and that's part of the totalization agreement, which is really helpful because I've had plenty of calls from people that say I need to move back to the States for a couple years worth of work to get my 40 credits, and all of a sudden, when you examine what countries they've worked in, totalization agreement to your favor.
So again, it's a facts and circumstances question, but
so that's why we think of all three of them. That you don't want to just think of, oh, okay, there's a double taxation agreement, therefore I don't have to think about it. There's 3 different agreements.
Yep.
One of them doesn't exist between the U.S. and France. So really, it's 2, and then you're stuck with estate taxes.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you forced to become a fiscal resident here after staying a certain amount of time, or can I choose even to live here and to continue to be a fiscal resident in the States?
So that comes back to what I talked about at the front. That it really depends on your facts and circumstances. But it's important to understand when it comes to fiscal residency, and this is funny enough what I was trying to explain to the tax auditor in Bahrain yesterday, is U.S. persons are always U.S. tax residents, irrespective of where you live. Hence the reason why I have a job, hence the reason why my kids have clothes on their backs today, is because of the fact that the U.S. tax system is such that U.S. citizens or green card holders are tax residents irrespective of where they live. France looks at facts and circumstances, looks at, again, where you work, where you live, where's your center of vital interest. So it depends.
And so you can choose depending on what your liability would be as a French tax.
You can't choose. You in terms of
Or you could try to declare, let's say, the U.S. as your principal resident.
No.
If you were coming over here more on a vacational time period, if you come over here a couple weeks a year, then you're going to be fiscally resident in the States. But if
you're here, babe.
If
exactly.
you're living here, you're here.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. If you're just hanging out for a couple of months to just enjoy Paris, no. If you live here, you're here. Point. Like there's no questions. There's no doubts. Again, the residency question is really it's à trancher every year. But honestly, if you live here, you're here. Like you're paying taxes to France, and again, you also have to pay taxes to America. That's why, again, firms like us, we do the French return, and then on the U.S. side, we ensure that you get the right credits to avoid double taxation.
Except having to pay Puma,
Perhaps.
Any advantage to becoming a French citizen?
Nope. From a tax perspective, no.
Shorter lines at the airport.
Sure.
He said any. He didn't ask just us.
sorry.
You know.
What?
You can vote.
Oh yes, you can vote. Vote, yes. But honestly, the only vote we care about is the one in November, Adrian.
I kind of care about the one on Saturday, but
fair enough.
So if I moved,
No, go ahead.
Moved here permanently last year, and I just talked to my tax accountant in San Francisco. Should he be doing my last year's tax return?
Yes. Sure. There's no reason not to. Again, I should shamelessly plug and say, send it to me. No. The answer is, in your situation, I don't know your
My bank
taxes.
accounts and brokerages are all in the States.
Then there's no, you may have to do a French tax return.
Yes.
May.
Okay.
Operative word, because again, I don't know your facts and circumstances. You may have to do a French tax return. You will have to do a U.S. tax return.
Right, yes.
And the U.S. tax return may be able to break residency in California.
Yes, that's
May.
what he's trying to do.
Yeah. So, yes. And again, there's no problem staying with your U.S. preparer on that kind of case. And again, may have a French return. Yes, sir.
Can you go back a step in terms of Social Security? When you talk about credits, I didn't know what that means.
Credits is basically you work for every year. If you work a year in the U.S., you get 4 credits for Social Security. So to get Social Security in the U.S., and Brian is better at this than me, so I don't know why I'm talking. That's just my foolhardiness.
You're doing great. I
to
love it.
get Social Security in the U.S., you have to have 40 credits. You have to work for 10 years, basically. So basically, if you work for 10 years, you get the 40 credits. So that's what Brian was talking about with regards to credit, is basically you need 40 credits. You need to work for 10 years to get U.S. Social Security.
Much more here.
Yeah.
But otherwise, your contributions in the U.S. have been lost.
Not exactly, but they're not. To be honest with you, I'm trying to figure that out for myself as well, because I worked in the U.S. for 5 years, and I need to figure out what the heck I'm going to do with those 5 years. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't specialize in Social Security. Go. Well, yeah. So basically, long story short is maybe. But
It's in Switzerland.
Oh.
yeah.
You're going to be able to play with that double taxation.
Oh
treaty.
no, I am good.
But
Exactly.
that doesn't affect.
Well, the question is, where am I going to live when I retire?
Where do I want to be when I grow up? That's
Exactly.
Jonathan's age-old question.
Exactly.
Okay.
You want to be when you die.
So now we have a credit system and foreign earned income exclusion. Now this is one of the big questions that we always have. What would be the difference between the two, and when is it advantageous to use one versus the other?
Okay, just to be clear, I asked Brian an easy question. I asked Brian a question that he went off and just from rote gave an answer. Now he's asking me, foreign earned income exclusion, foreign tax credit. It depends. And it depends mightily. The foreign tax credit system and the foreign earned income exclusion system are the two systems whereby the U.S. helps you avoid double taxation. Okay? And they interplay between each other. Okay? In the sense that The foreign earned income exclusion allows you to exclude for 2022, it was 120. 2023, it's 120. For 2024, I believe I looked this up, it was 126. It's in those papers, but they're far away from me. So basically, long story short, it's on those. It's in the ones for, it's 126 for 24, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, it allows you to exclude right off the top the first 126,000 that you earn. So basically, anyone in France. So if you earn in France $126,000, you can exclude that straight off the top and pay no U.S. taxes. And your U.S. tax return is a relatively simple U.S. tax return for us.
No, it's not.
Well, again, for
he
us.
said for
us.
him, yeah.
Operative word was for us. For us, it's relatively simple. Now, there's also the foreign tax credit. The foreign tax credit looks at how much tax did you pay to another country on that income, and you get a credit for it. Okay. Now, there's an interplay between the two, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but long story short, there's an interplay between the two, okay? And we try and take whichever one's best for you. In France, most people who are working are paying a lot of tax in France. Go figure. And you're also paying CSG, CRDS. So these Contributions Sociales Générales and the CRDS, which I don't remember what it stands for right now. But it doesn't really matter. So you pay these taxes, which are 9.7% on top of your income tax. So you basically will wind up with more taxes in France than your U.S. taxes will usually. So one thing that we do, and we do this on every single tax return, is we look at whether or not you're better served taking the foreign earned income exclusion or the foreign tax credit because of the interplay. Most of the time, Brian, living in France, you're better served taking the foreign tax credit. For one, you'll get more carryover because foreign tax credits, let's say you pay $10,000 now. Okay, sorry, I saw Adrian getting bored, so I've got to make this less boring. So I'll go less technical.
I'm definitely not bored.
Fair enough. $10,000. Let's say you pay $10,000 to France in taxes, right? And you have $8,000 of credits needed in the U.S. You have $2,000 carryover. Okay, you can carry those forward for 10 years. Okay, so there's this interplay that we do on every tax return of which one is better, the foreign earned income exclusion or foreign tax credit. And you're usually better with the foreign tax credit in France because of how much taxes you pay in France. And also one other thing, if you have children, it's generally better to take the foreign tax credit than the foreign earned income exclusion. So long story short, that's why firms like ours exist, because we do this stuff on the daily. And again, that's basically what we do. So long story short, it depends, but in France, it's usually a credit system.
Now, so what would be the main functions that you would use these accumulated credits for in the future? This little piggy bank of taxes. Would you use it for pensions or IRAs or?
Well, not for IRAs because IRAs are U.S. sourced.
Mm-hmm.
Pensions potentially. To be honest with you, what I usually build up these credits for in France is the rupture conventionnelle. The rupture conventionnelle is basically if you get fired from a French employer or if you quit from a French employer, they have to pay you a ton of money. That's why basically getting a long-term contract is hard in France. So basically, usually, most of my clients, we use these carryovers for the rupture conventionnelle because they get, I had a guy last year who got 700,000 euros. The first 300 were tax-free, just because he worked for 26 years at his company. So that's what I would use them for usually. And it's not like in Belgium where basically we build it up for pension, but in France, it's usually for the rupture conventionnelle that we use see it. All right, Brian, now my turn for you.
Oh, no.
You see, folks, I have a simple question for Brian. What is more dangerous in France? Going to the boulangerie every day, dangerous for your health. Going to the boulangerie every day and having a croissant, or speaking to your French banker and taking investment advice from your French banker?
Well, one's definitely more enjoyable, that's for sure.
So which one is more dangerous for your which one is more dangerous for your health, your long-term health, and your both financial, marital, and you have to understand. My first permutation of this had Can Girls in it, but my wife said nix that one. So
that's why I was laughing, because I was remembering the original one, and I thought it was going to be the baker and.
It's the baker or the
I thought I was going to get trapped in that question.
You have to you have to eat a pâtisserie every day or take investment advice from a French banker, Brian. As a U.S. person here, what's more dangerous?
So as a U.S. individual, using any foreign investments is going to be extremely detrimental on your U.S. taxes. And the main reason why is a rule in the States that's called the Passive Foreign Investment Company. It's a 4-letter acronym. Just like any 4-letter acronym, we shouldn't be using them in public settings. So essentially, if you buy any kind of investment here in France through your French banker, it might be nice from a French tax vantage point, but it's going to hurt you significantly on the US side of things. I joked with Jonathan once that I could see one time of actually buying a assurance vie in France, and that's as an American. And that's if you've got 3 months to live and you put it into a cash assurance vie. So unless you only have a couple months to live, essentially you don't want to touch any foreign investments. And Jonathan already told us that we have the bee's knees in all double taxation treaties between France and the United States, and therefore by investing in the United States, you're only going to be taxed in the United States. Even more so, by having the investments in the United States, they're cheaper than any French investment I've ever seen. You know, when we're looking at, say, VOO, which is the S&P 500, that's 0.02%. That's the fee on it. Most investment products here in France are going to be 1.5%. We don't have the same financial mechanisms in France as we do in the United States. So you avoid tax, you get lower fees, and essentially you make your life a lot easier by keeping it in the United States. And you're still able to use some of the deferral vehicles. If you're on the credit system, you can still make an IRA contribution, or even better, a backdoor Roth IRA contribution if you're not getting the reduction in taxes or you're not needing that tax credit. And the good news is I don't have to go through any of that, because anytime you have a client that gets a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, he's going to question me about it. He's going to grill me until we know exactly which one's going to be the most beneficial over the course of time.
I like how you take true stories and use
Yeah,
no, but basically the main thing is
go to the baker, don't go to the
go to the
bakery,
go to the baker,
not the
don't go to
banker.
the banker. Baker, not banker. U.S. does not want you to invest in foreign investment funds. They do not want you to invest in U.S. Foreign ETFs, foreign mutual funds. They do not, because they see that as a way to hide money abroad. So they have put in place, from a tax perspective, I'm not even talking investments, from just a pure tax perspective, the U.S. has put in place a punitive tax system, which hurts. Okay, it hurts. It hurts me every time I have to call and say, "Hey, you have $1,000 gain on this mutual fund in France. You have to pay $500 of tax." And then they scream at me, and they say, "How the flip is this possible, Jonathan?" And I say, "Because I told you not to invest in French mutual funds, but you did." So you have to be cognizant of this, and this is why the banker is more dangerous than the baker. Okay, it's clear as day to me. Yes, sir.
I think one question for
Good.
Colleen, but if we can't invest in ETFs and
Foreign ETFs.
and if we've already purchased an apartment via Adrian or any other lesser optimal method, what are other options?
Okay, so there's nothing that says you can't buy an ETF. So the reason why there is this misconception is because in the United States, basically, to represent an investment, I have to show you the performance backwards looking, right? So if I were to show you VOO, I would say, oh, in the last 10 years, it's averaged, say, 10.5% per annum on average. Now, if you said, what do I expect it to do next year? I can't publish that. Now, MiFID is the regulation here in Europe. And in Europe, they basically say, I have to have a future forecast of how the investment will look. Well, to follow Europe in Europe, because unless you're a sophisticated investor, we have to represent that. So what does my firm do? Well, we build a packaged product of ETFs, and then we're basically able to sell that in Europe with the forecast of what we expect it to have in future returns, and readapt that each year, and we're just using the vehicles beneath that. So that's why, as a registered investment advisor, I can sell you a packet of ETFs, but if you go to Vanguard and say, I'm a French resident, they'll say, please leave, right? There's no rule that says you can't, it's just that the rules are different from both sides. You can use, say, a product, say you don't want to go through an advisor. We have a robo-advisor, DF Direct, so you can go directly on there. There's no minimums. You just set up your account. You can set up $50 a month, 50,000, whatever you want, and it's a low-cost service. Or you can go directly to a firm like Interactive Brokers is probably the most famous one here in Europe. They'll let you open an account here in France. Now, it doesn't work for small dollar amounts, but as long as you're doing over 50,000, you can direct index. So instead of buying the S&P 500 ETF, you buy all 500 of those stocks. So that's why it doesn't work on a small basis. But if you're doing 50 or 100,000, essentially you'd be buying enough stock to be able to merit that. So there are ways to get around it, but that's why it is there. And it's nothing in the regulation that says you can't buy an ETF. It's how they're packaged, representing both sides of the rules.
What is a PEA considered?
A plan d'épargne d'action
Yeah, because
is
you
an
can buy individual stocks and exchange them and I pay tax on it and everything.
That's great.
But if I were to put it in a PEA,
That's
which doesn't tax, how do I declare that?
So that's where it gets tricky. A PEA is a plan d'épargne d'action, which generally I'm assuming you got from your employer, or you set that up yourself.
Yeah, if I
Okay.
set it up myself.
You set it up yourself. So a PEA is a good investment if you can do direct stocks as much as possible. Because again, if you're the plan d'épargne employeur, the PEE, you're more forced to invest in mutual funds through that or ETFs through that. That is my recommendation is take the money and whenever you can get out, which is generally within 5 years, get out within 5 years. Because you're going to pay PFIC taxes on it. The less amount of time you hold it, the less the taxes or less punitive it is. But in terms of your PEA is fine if you invest in direct stocks. Try not to invest in mutual funds. From a tax perspective, I'm only talking taxes. Again, if there's a fund that you know is going to go through the roof and make a 100% return, pay the tax. So be it. But
the exchange, the buying and selling, you don't declare the revenue in France.
yes, but you declare it in America.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about employee-based ones?
Same thing. Technically the same thing. You got to remember the
Because you can't
French.
decide where they're going to invest.
No, and that's the problem with those kind of funds. With the PEs is because you can't decide where it goes. Technically, you're investing in PFICs there, and basically when you sell, you're going to get hit with punitive U.S. taxation. That's the problem to a certain extent. That's what makes my job a little hard and that's why we talk about it. Is basically the French rules are made for the French people.
Yes.
Americans are American first, second, third, fourth, 10. It doesn't matter if you've lived in France all your life. If you're American, you've got to follow the American rules. So unfortunately, a PEE, you've got PFICs, you've got U.S.
But it's blocked for you.
It's blocked for It's blocked generally for 5 years, if I understand it correctly. Oh, you got to. Okay, so again, it depends.
Retirement-based ones.
It depends. It depends on. It depends. Again, it depends on the rules of the plan. But you more likely to not have a PFIC. You're probably holding on to a PFIC.
So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
Civil War happens, and Lincoln puts in citizens-based taxation.
Sure.
Right? Because people were fleeing over.
Lincoln to thank for that?
Yep, we have Lincoln to thank for that. They were all fleeing to Canada. I don't know why I'm pointing at the Canadians, but then all of a sudden Nixon comes in, and he starts making us disclose any amounts over $10,000 with our FBARs.
Yeah.
So Nixon comes into place, and we don't inflation index that. So 10,000 was a lot of money back then, but now it's not that much money.
Yep.
Then Reagan comes into place and puts in a PFIC rule because everybody was hiding their money in the Caymans.
Yep.
And then FATCA comes into place, and all of this is Obama's fault.
Yes, that's
right?
true. That's true. That's true.
Somebody's fault, not mine.
I just wanted to make sure I understood it right.
Everyone's
But basically what Brian's getting at here is the FBAR rules. Okay, so again, these are other rules that Americans have to remember. You have foreign bank account reporting requirements in the U.S. If you have over $10,000 in foreign bank accounts, you have an FBAR filing requirement with the FinCEN, the FinCEN, the Department.
It's the Treasury.
Treasury. Well, it's Department of Treasury. I'm trying to remember what FinCEN stood for. Anyways, it's with the Treasury. So you have an FBAR filing requirement. It needs to be done by October 15th. In addition, there is now a FATCA, there's an 8938 filing requirement, whereby you have to additionally, if you have over 200,000 or 300,000 or 400, it depends on your filing status, but if you have over generally 200,000, that's where it starts, you also have to do a second filing within your tax return. So again, the US government wants to know where your money is, and that's why they have all these rules in place.
The French government does too.
The French government does as well. Now the French government is a little better in my opinion than the US, because they don't want to know the maximum value in the account every year. They just want to know what you have. So you still need to tell them if you open a bank account, close a bank account, if you open a foreign insurance policy, a life insurance policy, you have to tell them this kind of stuff. But it's at least you don't have to tell them every year how much money you have in the account. That's where it gets heavy. But basically you do have this FBAR requirement additional to your tax return.
Well, a couple things to add on that FBAR. First of all, it's $10,000 for all of your accounts in accumulation. And it's not just your personal accounts, it's anything you're signatory for. So
Checking accounts.
absolutely, absolutely.
Because if you have 10,000 today, tomorrow you won't.
Doesn't matter. You can have 10,000 for a second.
All it has to do.
So it's just reporting, but you don't have to pay.
No, just reporting.
And if you're the signer for a charity and it has $1 million in there, you have to report that. On a company, if you're the treasurer, you have to, if you're the CEO, boom, you have to actually report that on your FBAR. And then you have to report all the rest of your accounts as well. So make sure you're paying attention to that, because it's not just one account, and it's not just what's in your individual name.
So, like, say I was going to buy an apartment here and I transferred some money from the U.S. and then I
Report it.
spent it on the apartment. But you
Absolutely.
Just report it. I don't have to pay taxes.
It's a reporting requirement. It's at the end of the day, you just have to tell the U.S. government. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. It's a simple form to file, but it's something you just need to know you have to do, because again, there are penalties if you don't, for non-compliance. Okay, so again, we do not want to be non-compliant. It's not hard to tell the U.S. government, hey, I have a bank account at BNP Paribas, it had 475,000 euros in it, and move on with your life. Because again, they're not going to come after you. They will if you don't do it. Okay, so that's why we have all these requirements. Okay. What else we got, Brian?
Oh, we've got a full list here.
I'll follow up on her question quickly. Any quick suggestions on best way to move money from U.S. to France in preparation for buying a property? Discuss forward contracts.
So the best way to do it is to use a company such as a company like Money Corp. It's basically using someone like them because they give you a better exchange rate. And now Adrian will tell you how it all works, but basically, and I'll paraphrase and Adrian will correct me when I'm wrong, is basically, if you're going to buy a property in France, you move the money from your U.S. bank account, you send it to Money Corp, they make the exchange, they then send it directly to the notaire. Correct. Not to your bank account, it goes straight to the notaire. Did I get it right, Adrian? See, I listen to Adrian, I make sure to listen to Adrian. So you transfer it straight to the notaire, and then you buy the notaire will pay for the fees. That's the best way to do it when it comes to buying a property in France.
We have 3 currency brokers that are listed on our website.
Just trying to keep it out of sight.
Money Corp, Currencies for You, and OFX. And you just can interview them and see which one you like to work with. Very easy.
Negotiate with them. They will negotiate.
Yes, they will.
They will negotiate. Literally, never get on the phone with them without looking up what the spot rate is, i.e. just go into Google, euro to US dollar, take the spot rate and have that in front of you. And then negotiate from that. You can pull from many of their websites what their suggested rate is, so have each of the competitors up there. They will negotiate with you. I promise you that.
That's true, they will.
To me, my main reason, because as you can tell, I negotiate with them on price in a big way. If I'm doing a big transaction, I still use them. The main reason is, if you do enough financial transactions, something's going to go wrong at some point. Sometimes you're going to be able to find a cheaper online solution, but then you're going to go to a chat bot when you're trying to buy your house. And I guarantee you, if you don't show up with the money for your house here in France on the right day, you're going to have bigger problems than saving a couple bucks. So having somebody that's your actual agent for that exact transaction, if you're doing a large $250,000, $500,000 transaction, is the most important reason why I suggest using them on the big transactions.
And do not use Wise for that. Because they're not option for, as well as the currency brokers, where you can speak to a real individual who can really help you. I mean, if you're doing a small transaction online, no big deal, right? It's a few bucks, who cares? But on a big transaction, you want to work with someone who's really has your interest in mind.
My going rule is under 10,000 I use Revolut and Wise. Over 10,000 I use a real broker. You know, so
Mine
that.
is 5,000.
Yeah. Okay, so Jonathan, you've scared everybody about wanting to have any money. So
Yeah.
now they want to gift it all away.
Oh gosh.
How do they do so? What are the rules here in France?
Send the check to Jonathan.
There you go.
That's an invoice. That's different.
Gifting rules in France. Another fun subject. Gifting in France is not as easy as in America. What I mean by that is there are limits before you get hit with gift taxes. It depends on who the person you gift to, the taxation of it.
And your age.
Well, no, we're talking about something else. We're talking about that, that's something else. That's the démembrement you're talking about here.
Okay.
The gift, the simple gift doesn't matter.
Okay.
Well, anyways. Long story short, you gift money.
At least you know what the next question is.
I know the next question. Yeah. When you gift assets in France, it depends on who you gift it to. You will get hit with tax. That person has an exoneration, and it depends on what your relationship with the person is. So, for example, if you want to gift money or goods to your child, you can do that without gift taxes in France, up to 100,000 euros every 15 years. So,
How many?
15 years. 100,000 euros every 15 years. So if you gift, and this Danielle and I were on the phone with someone yesterday talking to someone about it. If you gift someone 20,000 euros today, that 20,000 stays on your 100,000 number for the next 15 years. Then it drops off and so on. So basically you can gift 100,000 to your children every 15 years. You can gift to your nieces and nephews, I think 8,000 every 15 years. Again, the numbers change. I only know the 100 for kids right now, top of head. But basically, every 15 years. Then you get hit with gift tax, depending on how much you give. If you gift to the postman or to someone who is not related to you, you can gift up to 1,596 euros tax-free. That I remember, tax-free. And then after that, it's 60%. So again, Brian's question, and the reason for Brian's question is, if you can gift before coming to France. Now y'all are here already, so there's not really much we can do. But if you can gift before coming to France, it's better.
As a tax resident.
As a tax
A lot
resident.
of these people are not yet tax residents.
If a lot of you are not tax residents, then that's a good answer.
Then you need to have that question.
Then you need to have that question. You need to look at that question. Are you a tax resident? If you are a tax resident, there's not much we can do. If you're not a tax resident and you want to move to France and are about to become a tax resident, you would still fall under the American rules, which are up to 13.62 million, something like that, gift this year.
But it's layered because you have the 17,000 that you can gift without having to report anything on the U.S. side.
Yep.
If you go over that,
So-
then that 13.62 million
Kicks in.
just reduces your estate tax exemption by the same amount.
Yeah. So basically, if you gift in America over 17,000, it's now 18,000 in 2024. If you gift over 18,000, you basically have to do a gift tax return, but you won't pay any gift tax. Again, theoretically, as long as it's below 13 million. But once you get over that 18,000, you have that gift tax filing. In France, it's much, much lower, and it's much, much more punitive. Well, not punitive, but basically, the tax is much higher. Now, there are ways to get around and minimize the gift tax. For example, if you're going to gift a property, and the way to do that is in France they have something called démembrement, whereby you split the property between the use and the ownership, and that will help you reduce your taxes. And that's something you can work with a notaire on. Again, there are ways to reduce this and work on this, but these are things that have to be done on a case-by-case basis. Okay. Does that answer your question, Brian?
That does. So is this why your post office guy is really happy because you give him $1,596 every single year?
Every 15 years.
Every 15.
Every 15 years.
Oh, jeez.
One other thing, if you get gifted from a foreign person, Okay, and this is an interesting one because Brian and I were talking about a client earlier. The spouse is not American. Well, the spouse gifted to her children $1 million each a couple of years ago. Well, when she gifted $1 million each, those kids have, the kids, not the woman, well, the woman has a French tax filing, the kids have a U.S. filing requirement to report a gift from a non-resident. So if you get a gift from someone who's not American, over $100,000. So again, if you're lucky enough to have Brian as a friend and you get his normal Christmas present, you know, you'll have to have a gift filing requirement if he was not American. So basically, you have to watch out for that. It's basically if you get gifted over $100,000, you have this a U.S. filing requirement as well. Okay.
When do you become a fiscal tax resident? Is it 183 days, or is it 3 months, or is it a year, or what?
You missed the start of my conversation of this because you missed the start. It depends. It depends. It really depends. The 183 days is a factor that comes into play. It really depends on whether it's your facts and circumstances. We have to look at all your facts and circumstances. We have to look at where's your center of vital interest. We have to look at where your homes are, so on. So 183 days, maybe, is the long and the short of it. Bill.
Can you talk about an SCI and whether or not that helps?
An SCI from a U.S. tax
with the gift tax?
No. There's nothing to do with the gift taxes.
Okay.
There's nothing with the gift taxes. There's démembrement, which is again that the usufruct. That's separate. That's not SCI. I don't for a gift tax. I don't think there's much there.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
If you have a joint account with somebody,
Yes.
you tend to put your money into it, and the other person takes the money out.
Good deal.
Do you want to open a joint account?
It's a gift, but it's not really a gift.
Yeah. The problem with that fact pattern is if you put money into a bank account and your spouse takes the money out, is it a gift or is it just a joint account? If you put the money in and I'm the signatory and I take the money out, is it a gift? It's again, and the problem is, you're looking at it. You got to remember, the French tax authorities can always challenge this, and they can always go back and look at these accounts. And it's really, let's say we do this. Let's say you set up an account and it's you and me, and you put money in and I take it out. We could do this for years. Great, mazel tov. But when you die, you have to do an estate tax return, and the French tax authorities at that moment may start asking questions. So yes, you could probably do it, but eventually someone's going to get wind of it.
How are they going to know who takes the money out?
They're gonna when you die, you've got to go through a full reporting of your estate. So what happens? You had $1 million 10 years ago. Now it's $50,000. What happened to that $950,000? Where'd it go?
I went to restaurants.
Fair enough.
Adrian, delete that part of the recording if you don't mind. It should not be submitted.
No, but basically, you've got to be careful about that because the French tax authorities and every tax authorities, they will eventually find out. The problem is you cannot assume that they're not going to figure it out. That's why I am the most cautious guy. Brian laughed at me earlier when I walked in because I had a toque and gloves and whatnot. He said, "You're wrapped in bubble wrap." I'm like, "Yes, because I don't want to flip and catch a cold. I don't want my clients to catch a cold with the French tax authorities either." So I would say, in that kind of case, yeah, you probably...
All about risk.
Remember that movie, Le Dîner des Cons?
Yes. Yes. And Marlène Sasseur. But basically, you've got to be careful about that because, again, eventually they may catch up to you, and it would generally be through an estate filing. There is one other thing that's going to ruin some of your days, and Brian doesn't want me to bring it up because Brian wants everyone to be happy, but alas, I have to talk about it. Trusts. Trusts.
I need a drink.
US trusts. Okay? And I'm bringing this up not because I don't do trust filings, but I work with a client, with someone who does. If you have a U.S. trust, the French tax authorities want to know about it. They want to know about it, and they want to have an annual filing of the trust assets They also will want to have event filings of any money going in, out, any changes to the trust, or so on. So if you have a trust, or if you move to France with a trust, there is a second French tax filing if you're a French tax resident. That's why I say to people who have multiple trusts to watch out on when they become residents, is if you have a trust, you have a second French tax filing that comes into play. And the penalties for not filing a trust filing in France are up to 20,000 euros. Okay? It is not cheap. It's not, so it's just one of those things you also just have to keep in mind. If you have a trust and you move to France, there will be a French trust filing requirement and potentially multiple French trust filing requirements, because you've got to be careful. You know, we have some clients who've used their trusts as piggy banks and basically taking money in and out all the time. Well, that's a multitude of event filings. So you need to just be careful about this. So if you have if you're a French tax resident and you have a trust in the U.S., which again, if you were in the U.S. and you all came to me and said, "What should I do? You know, before we die?" I would say, set up a revocable living trust, because you know why the heck not? You want to avoid probate. In Maricopa County, it takes 2 years to go through a probate. So you want a revocable living trust in the U.S. But in France, they want to know it because they see these as tax shelters. So again, if you have a trust,
aren't they?
Most U.S. trusts are not. They're just a pass-through entity. They're just to avoid probate, to predetermine who is going to die. Now, in all honesty, if you're going to do that type of structure, keep it in the United States and do a transfer on death account, because now it's not considered a trust over here, but it avoids those segments in the United States. They used to be considered a poor man's trust. Now, essentially, they just keep you from going to the poorhouse by having to pay that fine. But you're essentially going to go end up at the notaire's office when you pass away over here, so you haven't avoided this side of probate. So the trust does not have that same advantage. It had a great advantage when you were in the States. It has a disadvantage over here. The only advantage you get is you get to spend more time with this guy.
Yeah. But basically, that's just the one thing I just wanted to share, is that if you have a trust, it has French tax implications, and it's something that, again, before people come across, I always tell them, hey, you need to have a conversation with us. Again, we need to look at seeing whether or not it makes sense to keep the trust, and then from there, you work with your U.S. attorney, or you work with an attorney that we work with on these kind of questions. Yes, ma'am?
If you have a transfer on death, I understand it doesn't go through probate in the U.S. The French will still say, ooh, but it was transferred on death. You still have to pay tax on it.
Yeah.
Or the inheritors still
Yeah. It's never to avoid tax. All I'm saying is to avoid those filings, so that in the build-up, you've actually got the same structure as before, just without the trust.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit more about TOD? Because I was told that TOD is linked to a state, and if you're not domiciled and going through a U.S. probate, it'll fail.
Yeah. So it's not that it will fail. It's the fact that you're still going to be resident over here. So therefore, if you were in the United States, you would actually, all of your dependencies could actually fall under a TOD or an IRA, transfer on death. Transfer on death. So they are correct, but you're actually making an election in there of what you want your wishes to be. So it's something that gives the dependence of what the notaire can work upon. Now, is a will going to be better here in France? Absolutely. If somebody hasn't written their will, the number of people that I've talked to that haven't figured out what they want to do for a will, and they're sitting on it for years, it's that stopgap in between. So it's not a fail-safe, it is a replacement for the trust as you're waiting for setting up your French will.
But when you have a TOD in place, the brokerage house in the U.S., call it Vanguard or Schwab or whoever they are, they're going to find out that you're in France, even if you've been using your aunt's residence and address in the States. When you die and you show up with your death certificate, you were in France.
Right.
And so the first thing they're going to ask you for is your IRS clearance certificate. And you can't get an IRS clearance certificate without a huge process.
Right, but the first thing that I would say is if somebody doesn't want to work with you, you shouldn't work with them. There's a reason why Vanguard doesn't want to set up accounts here in France, is because they don't have an expertise for France. And that's why they don't want to deal with that, because essentially they're going to come into problems. There's broker. We've got our setup through DF Direct. There's Interactive Brokers, Morningstar. There's a plethora of entities that will work here in France. It's just not brands and names out there. I would always use an American expat firm because they understand how the two sides work and how they play into place. I've seen so many people using, say, a foreign earned income exclusion and then setting up IRAs at Vanguard, and then they try to blame Vanguard, and Vanguard's like, well, wait a second, no, you're resident in Massachusetts. You know, those are those types of things of, if there's not going to be a fail-safe of, if I lie to my broker-dealer, then what is my safeguard? No, you lied to the broker-dealer, and that's why you ended up in a dead end. So
your clients actually have their French address on their
absolutely. Okay.
Brian, when
Yeah.
you speak of wills, do you refer to a French will or a U.S. will?
I'm stealing his lines now. It depends. It depends where your assets are. It depends where essentially things should be structured from that vantage point.
Okay.
There's some times that you can have two wills, but most of the time I'd rather have one that usurps everything else depending on where you are. But it really depends on your situation. I know that just completely avoided your question, but
If you want your U.S. will, okay, to be the primary will, then you need a French will declaring
Yes.
that. So you need both.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. If you need help on that, reach out to me.
not in all
you can contact
situations.
someone.
In a more complex situation, yes, but not in every situation. The question was, does everybody need two wills?
That's a single page.
No, but I
Yeah,
have assets
it-
on both
it really
sides.
is.
So I have a French
should be
will that
handwritten.
declares
Yes.
the U.S. as my primary legal entity for to bequeath. But that's all it does is refer to the U.S. will.
Absolutely. You have a little bit more complex situation than
Yes,
most, though,
I have-
Adrian.
yes,
So,
I have a
so that's where I would say,
situation.
for a lot of people, they can have just one will,
Right.
and it
Oh,
will
I
be
know,
completely
it's
fine,
quite simple.
as it should be.
Exactly.
If you have property in both places.
Then you probably should have.
probably, yeah.
You probably should.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, your French will could be a one-liner, basically saying, "Hey, I want to refer to U.S. Legislation when I die,"
That's all, yeah, that's
and that's
all.
all it literally says. And again, you probably have to work with a notaire on doing this, because again, when you pass, you want to have it with the notaire and want to have it registered with a notaire, so that way someone has a legal register of it all. Again, it's not like in the U.S. where you can have a will and it could be hidden, somewhere in your basement. You need to have it, with the notaire, registered with the notaire. But
And it's handwritten.
yes, it's handwritten.
But it can be written in English.
Oh, really? I thought it could. Okay.
I thought so too, but I just wrote one only in English.
So
Sorry.
let me ask you this. Let's say, either I die or Dean dies first, whatever. And in our US will, the properties and everything, all our assets go to the other spouse. But as we know, in France with the property, children and grandchildren, everybody else gets involved. If you have a French will that says the US will supersedes everything, then can the property go to the living spouse and the spouse sell it without any difficulty involving children?
I believe so, but I'm not a specialist in this, but I believe so. But I don't specialize in this question.
I can actually answer that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so if you own a property together, right, in your two names, and one spouse dies, the other spouse inherits it 100%, as long as you have a will in place, okay? And then you can do whatever you want with that property. If you want to, if the remaining spouse wants to sell the property, have fun, no problem.
Well, that was the thing, and we just didn't want to have to get all the children and everybody else.
They are not yet involved.
Remember, the main reason that the French allow you to do the structure where the children inherit part but with user-free is to minimize the estate taxes. So you're actually, because it's a progressive tax when it comes to estate taxes, you're increasing the tax when the second person dies by not having the children inherit part of the property when the first one dies. Because
But the spouse don't have any.
They don't have any tax.
there won't be any estate. It will just be higher on the second death. So everybody that's in the room won't have to worry about it because you'll be dead.
Yeah.
So it's not a problem, but it's why the French don't go after that, is because they're going to get more taxation in the long run.
Well, how much tax would a child have to pay if they inherit?
Up to 45%.
Oh, Goodness.
But we don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
But if it's a spouse, it's 60%?
No, spouse is free. It's a mailman is 60%. The mailman 60%.
Now remember, this money is going to clean the river so that we can have a nice Olympics this summer. Okay? So it's too soon. Too soon.
We have 5 minutes for questions.
Are trusts not covered by U.S.-French tax treaty because you make special mention of them?
I wanted to ask that question, but I thought it'd be
No,
too mean.
They're not. No. So trusts, the French, it's a reporting requirement. So you have a reporting requirement, and then the income from the trust also has to be reported on the tax.
But it's not double taxed.
No, generally not.
But does that mean it's taxed in France, and then you get to offset that in the United
No,
States
other
if
way
it's
around.
not covered?
It's
Okay.
usually
So
France.
you're still going to be able to use the double taxation agreement to have it taxed in the United States.
Generally, yeah. Yeah. But again,
Keyword is generally, which
Yeah.
means it depends.
Yeah.
Which means talk to him because the trusts are really important. That is
and
what.
trusts are problematic, and
They're ever changing right now.
Exactly. And the rules, and again, the French don't like trusts. They see it as tax shelters. So again, it's just something else just to add to the list of plethora of things that a U.S. person living abroad has to remember. But if you have that, just keep it in mind that you have an additional filing requirement potentially. More likely than not.
But is it worth it?
The trust? I don't know.
No, living.
Living in
up
France.
With all of
Of course, it's all worth. Living in France is definitely worth it as long as you live in one of the 74 best. As long as you live in the right département. And Adrian says this is the right département, so I'm going to say it's the right département because I don't want y'all to lynch me. Brian agrees totally. Brian would go to Paris every minute of the day.
He's going to Antibes.
I'm going to Hérault.
Last time I met with him was in Megève, which is the only place that square footage is actually more expensive than Paris.
Where?
Megève.
Megève.
Yeah.
Right next to Geneva, in the Alps.
Yeah.
In the Alps.
Didn't even know it existed before he sent me over there.
Yeah.
You know.
Brian
Hobnobbing with the rich and famous over there.
Yeah, sure. Hey, yes, ma'am.
Is French property considered a foreign investment if it's not producing income?
No, a French property is not a foreign investment. If it doesn't have income, there's no U.S. tax implications at all to it. Now, if you rent it out, then yes, it would be. But if you do,
And just don't tell Anne Hidalgo. Oh.
We have that on tape.
So I've got one last question for you.
All right.
How long does everybody have to be able to contact you this year before everything's due? What are our deadlines?
That's a great question. Basically, the deadlines. The U.S. tax filings. Okay, let's go for the U.S. tax deadlines. April 15th is the deadline that you have to make your payments for taxes to avoid any additional interest or penalties from accruing. Your real deadline is June 15th. You can file an extension until October, and then ask for an additional extension until December if you need to. That's why if you ever look for me in the first couple weeks in December, I'm working my tail off because that's a busy period for us. Because what happens is, if you're a retiree and don't have any French earned income, you can file your return whenever. Okay? If you have French earned income, you need to have your French tax return done first, and you need a French tax assessment first. So that's why generally for folks who work in France, you need to file your taxes in September or later once you've gotten your French tax avis. Okay? So that's why tax firms like mine are working later in the year. On the French side, the deadlines. April 13th, the tax declarations come online. You can start filing on April 13th per the local. So per the article that I read in the local yesterday, it's April 13th. The deadline to file by paper is May 22nd. You only file by paper in your first year. The deadline to file electronically is June 8th. Okay, so basically the deadline to file is June 8th, and for everyone in Paris, it's June 8th. Okay, so the French tax season is much shorter. Okay, so those are the deadlines. In terms of when to reach out to us whenever. Danielle and my wife will tell you that I'm very easy. I like people coming in. I like people being my friend. So I'm more than happy to talk to everyone and help everyone as much as we can, provided there are certain facts and circumstances and all that fun stuff. But reach out whenever you want.
Is this in Switzerland?
No, I'm in France. We're a French tax firm. The fact that I sit in Switzerland does not change anything. I just sit on the right side of the border. Now the advantage of me sitting in Switzerland and the firm sitting in Switzerland is I don't have to charge VAT. So you when I give a fee quote, it's that number. It's TTC. It's not hors tax. It's tout tax compris. So you don't get the 20% added surprise.
Oh, great.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question on the deadlines. June 8th to file electronically. What has been your experience in terms of when the avis d'impôt will come back?
The avis d'impôt will come back at some time after that.
Yes.
But basically, honest to God, I don't know. It really depends because I can tell you truthfully, I've had clients come in August get an avis. I had a client yesterday get his avis, okay, from 2022, and there's no difference. We filed the return the exact same way. So honestly, I don't know. It depends. Like it's generally August, September, October is when we see the rush. But there still are November, December, and again this year January trickling in, and again it's the January ones are usually the people we file by paper, but this year the guy yesterday was a guy we've done his return for the last 6 years, so I don't know.
Is it a first in, first out situation where if you file early, it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter. It's luck of the draw. It's to a certain extent luck of the draw. I'll answer. It's luck of the draw. Is the long and the short. I honestly. It's as simple as that, and that's the main thing to remember. The French tax authorities, to a certain extent, it's luck of the draw because if you follow on the right person in the right tax office who understands the French U.S. tax treaty, easy. Follow the wrong person, you could have a bit more dealings with the French authorities after. But again, it's one of those things. Not to panic, stay calm. Everything's going to be all right. We'll handle it relatively easily. It's just that it will happen. It will happen. But if you're here long enough, it's going to happen eventually. You don't have 5 years guaranteed it's going to happen at least once. But no.
We do have to wrap up. So,
yes.
First of all, huge thank you to Adrian for hosting today. Second of all, thank you guys all for attending. And third of all, thank you for paying for your drinks. So that Jonathan doesn't have to take it out of his postman's donation.
Exactly. I can give my postman more money.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.